The Battle of Chancellorsville occurred in 1863. It happened between April 26th and May 6th. It is considered by many to be Robert Lee's greatest victory in the United States Civil War. As a Confederate Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the Northern Virginia, Lee gained the victory at Chancellorsville through aggressive strategies using smaller armies than those of the opposing Union forces. He also had the assistance of valuable generals, such as Jubal Early and Stonewall Jackson. Lee's opponent in his battle was Joseph Hooker. Hooker had been the commander of the Army of the Potomac in January of 1863. Success for the Union forces had been evasive, and the Army was suffering from low morale, especially following the Union defeat at Fredericksburg. Desertion and insubordination was high, and the Army of the Potomac had its own problems. Joseph Hooker soon raised both the morale and the number of soldiers. The soldiers grew to almost having 134,000 troops, with now over 400 artillery pieces. This was over twice the size of the 60,000 troops under Lee. Hooker intended to use this large force to crush Lee and hopefully bring a swift and victorious end to the war. Hooker's plan was to use the pincer strategy. A pincer was an attempt to actually catch the soldier forces between two wings of the army. Hooker planned to use half of his forces to cross the Rappahannock River, in which was a town just below that of Fredericksburg. The other half of Hooker's forces would actually cross into the Rappahannock upstream and use that position upstream to actually attack the rear of Lee's troops. The implementation and the plan did not begin until late April, mainly due to uncooperative weather conditions. Finally, on April 26th, the Union troops crossed the Rappahannock near Fredericksburg. The other Union troops crossed the river upstream and over the next 4 days. Through cavalry surveillance by Stuart, the Confederate general, Lee was able to properly figure out Hooker's strength. Although it would have been a wise move for Lee to actually retreat at this time, being that he was outnumbered with Federal forces, and that threat on his army was from two separate and distinct directions. Lee was not going to retreat. In fact, he decided to go on the offense. He divided up his forces to actually harass Hooker's troops in different places. Lee left Jubal Early in Fredericksburg with about 30 pieces of artillery and 8,500 infantrymen. Lee then moved the remainder of his troops to an area of Chancellorsville. He did this to form an attack on the other half of Hooker's troops, and by doing so, Lee split his army, hoping to stop at Fredericksburg the half of the Union troops that were actually advancing. That way he can concentrate on the other half of the Federal Army. Hooker and his troops arrived at Chancellorsville on April 30th. They had advanced without any serious conflicts with Confederate forces, and Hooker's generals were elating at the progress made so far. Hooker made serious blunder, though, when he arrived at Chancellorsville. Hooker decided to halt the advance. He actually wanted to halt the advance to await for additional troops, and this decision alone angered even his own generals, all of which wanted to maintain the momentum of the fight and take this time to fight, continuing to engage the enemy.